So,
Live.
so you're going to hit the go button like Russia hit Ukraine? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we're just starting early. Just kind of like, well, I don't want to mention a particular country or whatever because Facebook may flag us for that. But yeah, we're firing shots early.
Oh, that's right. I didn't think about that. Danny, have you seen that? What do you think?
Oh goodness, I haven't watched it that close. I've been so consumed with my bills. I don't know enough to have a good discussion about it, honestly.
I
Yeah,
got you. I agree with that.
there's no fixing all the world politics and all that. We may as well stick to the state stuff and just try to fix that first. Huh?
Why worry about
And
problems over there when we got enough right here, right?
one thing I did find interesting is the citizens were taking up arms to repel the invasion.
Yeah, I saw that. That's interesting, and we'll sit here and chitter chat for a minute or two and then go to our countdown. But I want the folks watching to think about that concept for a minute. To be able to have arms to repel an invading army, their government has to hand them out.
Exactly.
That's just, yeah, of course, for
And
us over here in the U.S., that's crazy.
how proficient are they with those weapons if they are just being handed them today?
Right.
And,
I gotta say, not to promote TV shows or anything like that, but if anybody has watched the 1883 show, which is a spinoff of Yellowstone, or I guess it's a prequel to Yellowstone. Anyway, I won't give any spoilers away, but they're leading a group of immigrants, across the western continental U.S., but before it's been settled. And it's kind of the same situation. None of them have any weapons. They wouldn't really know how to use them if they had to, and kind of the same type of situation, it sounds like.
exactly.
All right, well, we've got about 24 people watching right now. That's not too bad considering we did start a few minutes early and it's a Thursday night. So I'm going to go ahead and take us into our countdown. That's about 2.5 to 3 minutes. When we come out of the countdown, we're going to get right into the meat of this and we'll start talking about some legislation that you've got pushing through Baton Rouge. How about that?
Sounds great. Thanks, guys.
All right, here we go. Countdown time. Well, Okay, let me get us back over here to our guest. All right, so of course we got all name tags under us, but our special guest tonight is District 1 State Representative Danny McCormick, who proudly wears the R in parentheses beside his name. And I got to say, you're one of our favorite reps because you put forward some interesting bills. Let's just put it that way.
I wouldn't have it any other way. What do you think?
Gives us all plenty to talk about. And so let's just kind of lead off tonight. We'll start off, which is kind of one of the main topics of the show, is HB 101, what I'm calling the Justifiable Homicide bill. I've read through it. Actually, kind of short, to the point. Not a whole lot to it, as far as some bills go, I suppose. But do you want to kind of maybe lead off and tell us, where did this come from? I mean, I completely get the constitutional carry bill, which I support 1,000%. As a matter of fact, I think it's silly that you even had to put forward a constitutional carry bill. We shouldn't even need that, but that's a whole other story. So what prompted you to write this bill, or how did this come about?
There's kind of a little history behind all the Second Amendment bills that I run. I think a mistake is Republicans, what we're making with the Second Amendment is we stay on the defense all the time. We're all the time, the left's running bills and we're on the defense. Well, I learned early in life that the best defense is a good offense. And that's why I'm running my true constitutional carry bill. And that's why I'm running House Bill 101. There's a retired judge that's in my district that's a friend of mine, and we got to discussing, what are our rights, and if there is a riot. I mean, we've seen the riots in town where the stores, all these facilities are burning, and no one's doing anything to save these people's livelihoods. They're going to be bankrupted, wiped out. And, you get to studying it, and the rioters have the rights. The property owners don't. And that's what this bill tries to do. Now, I want to enter into this conversation very gently, because I think the one human taking another human's life is very sacred, and it's something that I would suggest anybody stay completely away from. And, there's the moral aspect, which is extremely, extremely important to pay attention to. But there's also the financial aspect of it. I mean, right now, if somebody breaks into your house, and of course it depends on different factors where you live, somebody breaks into your house and you defend yourself with a weapon, and that person loses their life, you still may get charges filed against you, and it may cost you $250,000 to get out of that. So right. It's a very very serious thing. But why should during a riot the rioters have all the rights and the property owners not? I mean, this basically gives the property owners the ability, if they would like to, protect their business or home or any property during a riot. It specifies right. It's like right now, as y'all very well know, if I go home tonight and somebody's hooking up to my boat, stealing it, and I walk out there with a gun and shoot them, that's against the law. And it still will be against the law after this bill. I mean, if I walk out there and with my firearm and they don't physically threaten me, they can just hook on to my boat and go, and there's nothing I can do. I sure wouldn't at 61 wanting to go wrestle them, So, that still is going to be the case after this bill. But my concern is being preemptive. A lot of people would say, it's in Baton Rouge, that's a favorite. It's a solution looking for a problem. Well, we've seen what's going on, and there's precedent here. What we've seen going on in other states with buildings being burned and people not being able to defend their property. And this just gives the rights to the property owner if he's in a situation he would like to use those rights. I think it's a fallacy that if we give the rights back to the citizens, that it's almost a fallacy. Like everybody's standing around with a pistol in their hand waiting for them to change the law where they go to shooting people. Well, that's not going to happen. I mean, law-abiding citizens that have been law-abiding citizens all their life is not going to pick up a firearm and use it dangerously, several, large percentages of the time. So
Well,
this bill,
it's like the old saying, not to interrupt you, but it's like the old saying in a lot of the, let's just say, very liberal, left-leaning states that, oh my goodness, if you give them constitutional carry, it's going to be the Wild West. There'll be blood running in the streets, blah, blah, blah. And of course, as we know, there's 14 or 15 other states that have constitutional carry, and there's not blood running in the streets. So you bring up a good point. One of the counter arguments to any of these, I'll just say, type of bills is, yeah, everybody's just going to use it as an excuse to shoot. And I got to say, on first reading, I've got a few reservations actually along that line. And I'm about as far from being a left-leaning liberal as it gets. But I'll bring the bill up here in a second on the screen, and we'll talk about it and maybe kind of, go through some of those points.
Yeah, and Danny, somebody brought it to our attention and was kind of like, have you seen this? And I had a little bit of concern, and I guess, I ain't going to describe it as a knee-jerk reaction, but upon first reading it, it does give you a little bit of pause, because it is no laughing matter, and it's pretty dadgum serious thing, like you articulated a while ago, to consider taking somebody's life. But and I hate to say it this way, but I think you and I talked about this on the phone earlier. I mean, if I found myself that I walked up on somebody with my boat and I had to produce my firearm and shoot them, some way in there I would articulate that I felt endangered. My life felt endangered, and but that's not always going to be the case, right? Or and I'm not worried so much, like y'all both have articulated, folks who carry all the time. I'm worried about our justice system manipulating this. And I would say to folks watching, what about Ashley Babbitt, at the Capitol? I mean, wouldn't this justify that shooting? Would it not?
Well, I presume this pertains to individual citizens. I don't know if this pertains to police officers or not. I really don't know the legal answer to that question. I wouldn't think so, but I don't know.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and put it up on the screen here, so it should show up on everybody's screen. And, of course, I know a lot of folks that are watching, it may be on a mobile phone. It's hard to see, so I'll try to kind of read. I'm not going to read the whole bill, obviously, but I'll kind of try to read a little bit as we go along. And I got to say, so I'm just gonna start and read like the first part of it, Danny, and then we'll continue the discussion. So this is an act to enact RS 1420A5 relative to defenses to prosecution, to provide relative to the defense of justifiable homicide, to provide that a homicide is justified when committed to prevent imminent destruction of property or, key word, imminent threat of tumultuous and violent conduct during a riot, and to provide for related matters. So, Danny, and again, I agree with Duke. You articulated very well, and I'm really glad that you kind of let off with, "Hey, this is a really serious matter. You're not just throwing it out there just to be gung ho, pro Second Amendment hoorah type thing." But I got to say here, let me give you my big reservation about it at this point. And again, I realize it may get amended and all that sort of thing. Is that who determines what the property is, and who determines what the value of that property should be before you're justified in shooting? Is it three? Because the Louisiana law basically says a riot is 3 people or more and doing certain things. We'll get to that in a second. But is that breaking a window? Is it? What's your intent in writing this bill? And and with the attorneys or whoever helped you out or whatever. What is the intent of this? Who determines that level?
Yeah, and the answer to that question would be a jury of 12 probably would be who determines that level. Or we have sometimes, I think, we prosecute things that 20 or 30 years ago would never made it to court. But yes, I'd say a jury of 12. So I think it's a very serious matter, I mean, because even with the right to defend yourself from bodily harm now, like we discussed earlier, I mean, the same ramifications to that will be the same ramifications to an individual here. But my point, my complete interest in this bill was to give the property owner rights. Right now, the rioter has all the rights. The property owner does not have the rights. And this any judgment call, in my opinion, should be to the property owner. He's a law-abiding legal citizen. He's if he's got a weapon, he has to be have it legally. There's so many criteria there. We won't discuss that tonight, but right now the rioter has all the rights. And as we've seen, we have professional rioters now. I mean, we've seen that where they're organizing, they're getting a mob up. So, we want to give the rights back to the individual, to the honest middle-class working person. That's what the intent is.
All right, so I got a couple more questions, and again, I'm not trying to do a gotcha or anything like that, because you and I agree eye to eye on, I'm sure, 99.999% of everything. But so we've already got one of my favorite statutes in all of Louisiana law, which is RS 1419, which is commonly known as the use of force statute. Okay, which means that, and I'm paraphrasing, I can pull it up here, but basically, if I feel imminent threat to my life or my health or my security, that I can respond with appropriate force up to and including lethal force. All right. And there's also a section in there where basically there's no duty to retreat and that sort of thing. We commonly call that the castle doctrine, even though it doesn't have to be inside my home. It doesn't even have to be inside my vehicle. I could be standing out on the sidewalk or whatever. But with this bill as written, does this mean, and let me rephrase that, was this the intent, or have you considered yet, well, okay, let's say that they're out there throwing Molotov cocktails, and they're throwing them from 15 or 20 yards away, okay? Does that mean I can sit there and pick them off with my rifle?
Well, I guess the question would be, if they're throwing them close enough to you right now, you'd still have the right to pick them off with your rifle, if that makes sense. I don't even know are they throwing them at you? Would you think that would be deadly force? I think you may have that right already without this bill.
Okay, and that was kind of where I was headed with that, actually, because at that point I would feel an imminent threat of bodily harm to me or my immediate family or whatever, and of course, and you bring up a good point too, I'm still going to have to talk to the DA's office, a grand jury and all that. It's not like, the cops show up and go, oh yeah, you were justified, you're free to go, see you later. We're done completely.
Let me make another scenario. Let's just assume that they're throwing them at you and you feel endangered and you defend yourself, but the prosecuting attorney says, no, they weren't throwing them at you, they were throwing them at the building. You didn't have any right to do this.
Right.
Well, under this bill, you take out some of the loopholes that the prosecutor may use to convict you. Fair
point. All right, so let's go through and we'll talk about this some more. And of course, Duke, feel free to chime in whenever.
We could, and I hate to scenario this to death. And one of the first thought that I had in mind, because I traveling down Benton Road, traffic is so tumultuous. Wasn't that one of the words? Tumultuous. There's some folks get some road rage. And I was thinking in my mind, I was like, you know what if I had an accident and I struck someone's vehicle? They felt like I did it on purpose and they jumped out and put a magazine in me. And then wouldn't they be able to say that he was trying to kill me with that car? And they would be able to use this provision to get off. And that's where my concern is because I don't have much faith in the judiciary. And I could see some, I don't know. I could see it going sideways, and not for the good guys, but for the bad guys. Or maybe that's wrong to say good guys and bad guys. Am I wrong in being concerned about that? Maybe.
Yes, because that's not a riot. This bill only pertains to riots. So that's a scenario that wouldn't be covered under this bill.
Yeah, but the way I read this bill, Danny, that sentence breaks it up into two parts. There's an or in there which to me indicates two separate parts. We're talking about property, and then we're talking about riots, and those are two separate things the way I read it. Am I reading it wrong?
Well, and actually, I think we talked about that earlier. We're going to amend it to clean it up. I had a retired judge read it, had two other attorneys read it. That's not how they read it, but you're not the first one that's brought up that concern. So we want to make sure we clean it up so there's no misunderstanding. So, you're not the first one to bring that up. So it's definitely an issue with the language. The attorneys that wrote it and reviewed it didn't think it was. And when I even called them back, they still didn't think it was, but they seen the point and think we do need to amend it to clean it up and make sure there's no misunderstanding there.
Yeah, I try to remind people all the time that your rights only go as far as the least restrictive law that a DA and or lawyers and judges interpret. And so you're right, and I'm glad to hear you say that y'all are going to kind of revisit that and maybe amend it or reword it a little bit, because what you think, what Duke and I think, and maybe what your intent is, and what a certain judge or judges and a couple of lawyers think is not necessarily what an overzealous prosecutor is going to think.
And that's exactly
the problem.
And I agree. I mean, I call when a bill like this, I like to listen to everybody so we can solve the problems before we get to Baton Rouge, because, the intent is to run the cleanest bill possible. But my intent is, this is during a riot, and during the riot, I want the property owner, the odds to be in his favor. I don't want right now the law, what we have now favors the rioter, not the property owner. So that's my intent to favor in a judgment call. I want to favor the property owner, not the rioter.
All right, so let's define riot as, of course, defined by state law, which is RS 14-329.1, and a riot is, and again, I'll read it out for those that are on mobile and can't really see it, the small type. Anyway, it says a riot is a public disturbance involving an assemblage of three or more persons acting together or in concert, which by tumultuous and violent conduct or the imminent threat of tumultuous and violent conduct results in injury or damage to persons or property, or creates a clear and present danger of injury or damage to persons or property. So that's how the state defines a riot.
Yeah, and that was already in law. That's not something we had to create. So that's right. What the state has determined is a riot at this point in time in history.
Okay, so I'm going to switch back over. So let's see. Let me turn that off, and let's turn that one back on. All right. Let's see. Let me scan down through this. So right here in Section B, you can see it underlined, says, for purposes of this paragraph, a riot shall have the same meaning as provided in 14.329.1. All right. Let me bring up the second page of the bill here, which provides the abstract of it. And you can see in the abstract that, what the intent is, that a homicide is justified when committed to prevent imminent destruction of property or imminent threat of a riot. All right. I'm just scanning down this real quick. So I would say at this point I don't 100% support it, because I can see I can imagine a lot of scenarios where people might abuse this. I don't want to say loopholes, but the potential is there. But like Duke said earlier, I can also see where prosecutors, the DA's office, police departments, whatever, as they're investigating this, would be able to actually, I hate to use the word weaponize, but kind of weaponize the law against the original intent of it as well. It's always a slippery slope to me, especially when we're depending on the government to determine what the property is. And Dee Clark put up a good point. Let me see if I can find this comment again.
Let me ask you this question while you're looking at it. Just think Antifa is looking for a state to go to create havoc. I would think they would stay away from Louisiana more than likely if this law was in place. They would go to a state kind of like a school zone. You have a firearm-free school zone. That's where the criminals go. So I think this law would be preemptive and maybe keep some of those people from coming in our state like they have other states with the professional rioters and professional agitators and send them to other states with more lenient laws. So I think that's another good example of how this law could benefit.
Yeah, it could definitely have a deterring effect. There's no doubt about that. Let me put up Dee Dee's comment. I found it. I may have had the same one up a few minutes ago. But Dee Dee Clark says, does it really matter what the value is? Either a person has a right to defend his or her life and or property, or the person doesn't. So Dee Dee, let me be crystal clear with you. As our state laws are written right now, you do not have the right to defend your property with deadly force. You simply don't. I mean, you can do it, but you're going to definitely talk to the DA, a grand jury, and probably be indicted and probably be prosecuted. You don't have the right to shoot somebody because they're stealing your truck or stealing your boat. Maybe cattle. The laws with cattle used to be different, maybe not now. But it's actually much more limited than people think. We all like to say, oh, somebody's out there stealing my boat, I'm fixing to go out there and shoot them, and I'm justified. No, that is not true. Not legally.
Well,
Yes,
Danny,
right.
this ain't your only bill. You don't intend to just stir things up down there with just this alone. Surely not.
Oh, we're just getting started, dude.
That's kind of what I figured.
Yeah, so let's move on to some, I'll wrap up my little soapbox about that with, I support your bill for the most part, maybe with a few tweaks. But yeah, Duke, you're right. Let's segue into some other stuff. So, Danny, what other bills have you got going? Because, like we said, we pretty much like the stuff that you put forward.
Well, I appreciate it. It's not boring. You have to say that for sure, right?
Correct.
Well, I'm actually bringing my HCR back that I passed last year. It's going to be HCR 2, which actually suspends criminal penalties for pastors having church. Right under a state of emergency like we're in. Where you have a pastor that's being targeted in South Louisiana that had church, and this suspends the criminal penalty. So and it's an HCR because it's a House concurrent resolution. Mm-hmm. That means the Senate and the House has to pass it, and the governor can't veto it. That's why I ran an HCR. So that takes it out of the governor's veto pen away from that.
Let me ask you a question. Those HCRs, do they have the same teeth and force as an actual statute?
Well, all it can do is suspend the penalties for a year and 2 months.
Okay.
That's all it does.
Yeah, which pretty much takes the teeth out of the law. So, yeah.
That's right. It takes the teeth out of the law that the governor's using to possibly prosecute pastors for having church. Yes.
Hey, here's an idea. All of our Republican friends who claim that they're actually true conservatives down in Baton Rouge, maybe they can get a handle on our governor and his constant, renewing of the COVID pandemic status. I don't know, whatever you call it these days, that allows that same law to be in effect that you're having to take the teeth out of.
That's correct. Because being in the state of emergency makes the governor a dictator, and the representation of the people from the House and the Senate doesn't exist anymore, and the governor's a dictator, and it just takes a majority of the House and the Senate to take that authority away from him, and we cannot find the backbone with the majority of the Republicans in the House and Senate to do that.
You're putting that nicely, very nicely.
I agree.
We weren't so nice a few shows ago talking about Republicans, and
we were talking about kahunas and all sorts of things. So you put it very nicely there, Mr. McCormick. We sort of appreciate that, but anyway. All right. So yeah, that sounds like a definitely something that we would certainly support too as well. And all right, so
what is the bar on that for an HCR? Does the vote count change? Is it like 2/3 or what?
Just a simple majority on both sides.
That makes it a little easier to get through the House for the ones that are lacking those kahunas.
That's exactly right.
Okay, so what else have you got going on?
I guess we could talk about, I don't have a bill number yet, but I have a bill called Defy Roe, which basically it says that the state of Louisiana will decide if abortion is legal and when it becomes illegal in Louisiana. It basically is saying that the federal government has no right to tell us if we can make abortion legal or illegal in Louisiana, and we're running that bill. There's lots of precedents for it. I mean, I don't guess you could say there's legal precedents. I mean, don't go to your lawyer and say, hey, I'm going to defy the federal government supremacy clause. Is that legal? But there's moral precedents to it. I mean, we defied England when we started the American Revolution. The Runaway Slave Act, Massachusetts refused to comply with that. Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement defied Plessy versus Ferguson. And most recently in Louisiana defied the federal government by making medical marijuana legal, which I actually agree with. But on the other hand, I believe the life of the unborn is just as important as medical marijuana, if not quite a bit more. So that's our precedent. It doesn't have any teeth in the bill, but after we pass this bill, we can come back later and decide when a life begins and do away with abortion in Louisiana. That's the goal. And this is happening. We're working with Brian Gunter, a pastor that's been really proactive in the pro-life movement from Pollock, Louisiana. And also we're associating with 2 different national groups that are pushing this. So we got a lot of weight behind this. When I carry a bill like this particular bill, I like to bring lots of people to the table with the knowledge to defend it. So that's the gist of this. Like I said, no teeth in it. It's just going to set the groundwork for the bill to end abortion in Louisiana.
Yeah, and we certainly appreciate and support that. I've got a little Facebook post up here, which is the Defy Roe v. Wade deal that you've got going there. And so you want to take a second and kind of talk about this, or how does this help?
Yes, that's the bill I'm talking about. Defy Roe v. Wade, and everybody that like to, they can go to life4la.com. There's a petition you can sign there to get email updates on the progress of this bill. It's a hugely important bill. It's hugely popular in Louisiana. Louisiana is one of the top 5 states against abortion in the United States. And as a Christian, or as a believer in God, whether it's Christian or not, what we need to ask ourselves, and I challenge myself and lots of Christian men, we're talking about life. When does life begin? My question to them: when does a human being get a soul? And is that soul grown in a mother's belly, or is that soul put into that baby in the womb? And pretty much we believe in my particular religion that the Holy Spirit puts the soul in that baby at conception in the womb, and that's a whole different. We're not talking about a dog or a cat. We're talking about a human being with a soul that doesn't die, that lives forever. And I know this is, everybody listening may not have the same beliefs that we have, but as Christians, we have to look at it from that direction, though.
Amen, and I appreciate that viewpoint and that stance as well. And look, even from let's say maybe a little more practical standpoint, a lot of states, I think Louisiana is included, but God forbid a pregnant mother is murdered or whatever happens, the killer will get charged with double murder. Yet in some of those same states, or locations, they're pro-abortion. Oh, well, life doesn't begin until birth. But wait a minute, how can you turn around and charge somebody for a double murder, of somebody that's got an unborn child with them? So, yeah, it's crazy out there. So we certainly appreciate your efforts on this part, and I would encourage everybody to go check out the website and, do whatever you can to help support the bill. And you're right also that you got to start somewhere. People all the time will claim, especially, I'm big into the Second Amendment and all that, but they'll claim, well, that's against the Second Amendment, and so they can't do anything to me. Oh, yeah, they can. You have to sue your way out of it, all the way and up to maybe the Supreme Court, which costs a lot of money. Therefore, it is legal until you can prove it's not, and that's a problem. Same thing with Roe v. Wade. It is legal, the law of the land, until somebody can prove otherwise in the court system. And that's always the challenge.
Well, surely you don't have just two bills.
No, we're just getting started here.
Okay. I thought you might have more.
Of course, we talked about constitutional carry, and which is House Bill 37. The next one I talk about is House Bill 177, which prohibits. It's actually a constitutional amendment. House Bill 177 prohibits discriminations based on vaccination status. So that bill cannot be vetoed by the governor. Constitutional amendments cannot be vetoed by the governor. They do have to have a supermajority to pass, though, and put it in front of the people. I'm very interested to see what kind of overwhelming response we get from the people when we put this, if we're able to put this on the ballot next November.
So kind of give us a summary. I'm showing it on the screen here and just kind of slow scanning down it. But kind of give us a summary. What is this bill about, or what does it do? What's the purpose?
Well, the purpose right now, people can be. I mean, look at what's going on in New Orleans. We've been looking for a way to help the liberty-minded people in New Orleans. I mean, they live in they're living. You know, that you would think they lived in New York. The way that mayor LaToya is treating her citizens. This would be a way for the state to relieve them of the burdens of having to show the different, all the different regulations she has to do with vaccination, and it would increase tourism to the state if people were, didn't have these crippling effects when they come to the state. Louisiana is a huge tourism state. New Orleans is the center of that, and the mayor is destroying their economy and demanding that we send her more money to bail herself out after she destroys her economy. So this is a good way to set New Orleans free.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. Now, of course, I got to give you a little bit of a counter argument too. So let's look at the other side of the coin, because as, conservative Republicans, hoorah, blah, blah, all that kind of good stuff, we're also supposed to be pro-business. So just like, a business should be able to refuse somebody for not wearing shoes, or, and I hate to say this, but just like we've seen recently here in Bossier Parish, if a business wants to prohibit the open carry of a pistol, as pro-business people, even though we may not agree with that, they should have, in my opinion, they should have the right to do that. So the way that I'm reading this, and again, I'm just playing devil's advocate for a minute, this is basically limiting the rights of a business. Is that correct? But on the flip side, on the balance side of it, it's increasing the rights of individuals. Is that, anybody got any comments or feedback for that?
Yeah, I love to answer that question. What we're looking at here is, we're in extraordinary times. There are all kinds of exemptions out there that employees are getting denied, especially in several different industries. But what we're looking for is just to give a fair playing ground for the employees. But let's think about it this situation. Why are the big businesses, most of them, requiring these vaccines? It's not because they're personally motivated as a business. They're being coerced, I could just say, by the federal government to do so. And this is our chance to fight back and push against this. Let me ask you this question. I've been rolling this matter along because being pro-business it was a real struggle for me, and it took me a long time to work through this process, and I try to make it short. But, everybody talks about we're a socialist country. We're headed to socialism, which is the next step. It's communism. But, the other side of the spectrum is what's fascism? Fascism is something that's hard to describe. But one of the definitions I think it's mostly used is fascism is was when big business joins with government. So on communism, you have government owns all means of production. And in fascism, government and big business owns all forms of production. So the government is incentivizing these people to discriminate against their employees. So it's we're not fighting capitalism. Like, for instance, with the bank bailouts, was that capitalism? Well, it was crony capitalism at the best. So it's the same thing with this vaccination status. I read a bill last year, and the bill was actually vetoed on the governor's desk. But all the bill said was, a very simple bill: it's an employer did not require his customers or his employees to have a vaccination, that he couldn't be held liable for somebody that claimed they caught COVID-19 in his business. And the medical industry didn't oppose it until it got to the governor's desk. And I'm not saying the whole medical industry or the employees for sure. They were begging the governor to veto it. And one of the organizations that come out public, I found out who it was, and I got on the phone. I called the lady that was their lobbyist, and I said, "Baby, you don't rip your britches with me now. I mean, I went through the whole process, and you didn't have a negative word to say about this, and you're asking the governor to veto my bill?" I said, "Why?" And she started talking about, "Well, we're just concerned about this, that, and another." And I said, "I'm going to tell you something, ma'am." I said, "In Baton Rouge, it's about the money. It's not about anything to do with anybody's feelings or anything else." And finally, what she said is, "Well, we're afraid if a small hospital system doesn't require their employees to be vaccinated, that the larger hospitals are going to lose employees to the smaller hospitals." Well, that's not capitalism right there. So that's the I guess the rope we're trying to walk with this. And I understand that, but that argument that we don't want to get in business in the businesses of telling business what to do. But this just basically says you're discriminating against somebody if you ask that.
Well, fair point, and that's a great answer and a great counterpoint and counter argument as well. And that's pretty much why we really like you as a state rep. You've got real common sense responses and answers to the things that you're doing and why you're trying to do them. So now I will put up a comment. Let's see, every hospital to do it based on the mandate. This is from Wade Lovelace from Love Shreveport and Bossier, who's watches our show occasionally, and we appreciate him and the stuff that he does on social media. But Wade says, negative, every hospital is forcing staff to do it based on the mandate. I know Willis-Knighton pushed it off until they were forced to make employees to do it. And I think that might kind of go to your point, Danny, is that, forcing these businesses to do it just puts them in a position that at least some businesses, I would argue maybe most businesses, may probably not want to be in. And so maybe this law will try to help correct the ship. I don't know. The ship is so far turned around with everything, it seems like, in government these days. I'm not sure if there's any righting the ship or not.
Yeah, and I, we have to change the hearts and minds of the people of this country. That's truly at the end of the day, we can't change any laws, but to fix this. So I mean, but yes, I agree. But I do believe this is the greatest country in the world still. In reality, we still live better lives than people had done for hundreds of years. Anywhere in the world for thousands of years. So, I think we've kind of lost that innocence we had, 30, 40 years ago. And maybe you can tie it back to the United States getting off the gold standard in 1971. Maybe we can go back and tie it to that. I mean, there's a lots of issues we can go back and look at. But, once the majority of the people get tired of the way the government's acting, things have changed. Because let me tell you this is what I know in Baton Rouge or in politics. Politicians care about two things: campaign contributions and getting reelected. You mess with either one of those things, you got their attention. Now, you can call them a dirty rat, snake, no good, whatever you want to call them, and they're okay with that as long as you can continue to vote for them and give them campaign donations. So, I mean, that's what we have to do as to encourage the community to get involved and check the voting records. There's a lot of people that represent us, that a lot of people in the Arklatex or think conservative. They just haven't looked at their voting records yet.
That's very true. All right. So, and again, that's why we like you as a state rep. You just tell it like you see it. All right. So
yeah, you run out of ideas for bills, let me know, because I got a book full of ideas. And Wade Lovelace has one. You was talking about he didn't say it exactly, but your constitutional amendment. Why don't we have a constitutional amendment to limit this governor, to take away them powers?
Well, we've already got the process in place. Excuse me, guys. My battery's kind of running down, so I'm switching.
Sure.
Getting it plugged in. But we already have the process in place. We just don't have the politicians with the backbone enough to do it, and that's sad.
Ding,
and
ding, ding, ding.
Tell you, most of the ones in Northwest Louisiana have stood up to it. Some of them haven't, but most of them have.
Well, I'll save that conversation for another show. Some of them put out a lot of hot air, and then some of them actually put the bills forward. Let's just put it that way. We can't fault you if the legislature doesn't pass it or they don't override a veto. We can't fault you because you put those bills forward. You at least put the ink to the paper, so to speak. So
I understand. You bet.
All right. Anything else you want to talk about this evening as we kind of start wrapping it up?
You bet. One more thing. I'm working on turning Louisiana into a fossil fuel sanctuary state.
Okay, explain. Yeah, this will be interesting.
I got a series of 5 bills. I think what we were discussing earlier, I'm having a hard time getting me in the center of this picture.
Oh, you're all right.
What we discussed earlier was this. The government has said that the federal government and the governor said they're going to bankrupt the oil and gas industry, and they're going to do it by 2030. And what we know about government is they're good at destroying stuff. And we should take them at their word, saying that, oh, no, they've got to have oil and gas. No, they can destroy it. And now they're not good at building stuff. They're not going to build anything that's going to replace it. We're not going to have another reliable, cheap, dependable energy. That's not going to happen. So I'm taking the government at its word that when they say they're going to destroy the oil and gas industry, I'm taking them at its word. Something to keep in mind is 1 out of every 9 jobs in Louisiana is associated with the oil and gas industry. 20% of our gross domestic product in Louisiana is in the oil and gas fossil fuel industry. So what I'm doing to combat this from a federal level is we're running bills that the state of Louisiana will not invest any retirement money in companies that discriminate against fossil fuels. Also, another bill that the state of Louisiana will not contract with companies that discriminate against the fossil fuel energy. Another one's going to be that banks cannot discriminate against companies based on the mere fact they're in the fossil fuel industry. That's what's happening. We're getting these woke boards with these woke board members that are trying to use the government, use their force to bankrupt the oil and gas industry, and we're not going to do it. We're going to fight back. I'm running another bill that takes the ITEP exemptions away from solar and wind farms. Oil and gas doesn't get that exemption. They don't deserve it. And the next bill my last bill was really, really my favorite bill. I knew I was going to get a lot of attention with this bill. I had to pare it back. But first, I was going to do away with all sales tax, property tax, and severance tax on fossil fuels by the end of 2030, because that's when they're saying they're going to destroy the oil industry or the fossil fuel industry. So if they're going to do it, we need to do away with the taxes, right? Well, it looks like in this year, we're only going to be able to do it on the severance tax. So, we're going to have some interesting discussions. We're working on a video presentation to put into place that kind of shows the importance of the fossil fuel industry to Louisiana. What retirement system will we have in Louisiana if we destroy 20%, 26% of our gross domestic product when we destroy the fossil fuel industry? So working on that, and that's kind of a summary of my fossil fuel bills. So it's going to be exciting.
Well, make sure and keep us updated if there are any of our so-called Republican friends, and I use that term loosely, down in Baton Rouge that oppose that or give you any flack or static about it. Let us know, because we have no problem putting their name and their picture up on the screen. And, of course, they're welcome to come on the show and discuss their side, too. But anyway, let us know if you run into the opposition. We don't mind calling people out at all.
We'll even talk bad about them, and we won't tell them who told us.
Yeah.
Hey, tell them I told you. That way I'll give me a little clout next time.
There you go.
You know,
Okay.
I learned in Baton Rouge that when you got down there, they need to put a clock on the wall in Baton Rouge that said it's not the right time, because that's what people say. I really like your bill. It's just not the right time. So.
Wow. That's a good one. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for this evening. Danny, we appreciate you coming on again and discussing the bill and the other stuff that you got going forward too. Like I said, you know, we agree 99.99% on stuff. And, hey, you put the bills out there, good bills, you know, and get things stirred up. And to me, that's always a good thing. So you're welcome, of course, on the show anytime.
Thank you, Rex. Thank you, Duke. Y'all have a great time. Appreciate your show, man.
All right. Talk to you later. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right,
So
Mr. Lowry.
entertaining as usual.
Yes, sir. So we'll go ahead and wrap this up. I think this might be the shortest show we've done in a long time. We're not even at an hour, but I know you're not feeling the greatest right now, and I'm ready to go find me something to eat for dinner or whatever. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up here, and we'll see everybody.
Appreciate everybody. Yeah, appreciate everybody watching on a Thursday night, and you know, hopefully you educate yourself on these bills a little bit. There's going to be a lot of them. I think somebody posted 198 of them so far.
Wow.
I'm sure there'll be more. You know, that's where these laws that affect you every day come in. You got to weigh in on it.
Yeah, so we'll see everybody Tuesday night about 7 o'clock for the next show on Bossier Watch, and I'm sure we'll have something interesting to discuss from there, and we'll keep posting stuff, folks. Y'all keep sharing and tagging and letting your friends know to watch. Make sure and subscribe or like and follow the Louisiana Watch side as well if you're not already, and we'll just keep on keeping on.
Good night, Rex.
All right, good night, dude. See y'all later, folks.